Alright, so as I expected, the developer was very quick to answer my questions and give me all the pieces of information I needed to finally feel confident to explain to you how the last two tools work that we need to discuss, which are the double filter and the message factory. So let's start with the double filter. Now, what this does is if it receives two MIDI messages which are completely identical, it only passes through one of them, so one of them gets blocked. Now, when I say exactly the same message, I mean it has to be the same type of message, and here you have the different types. It could be nodes or CCs, any of these. It needs to be on the same channel. It needs to have the same value. It needs to be the same node, for instance. It needs to have the same velocity. Everything needs to be completely identical, in which case only one of those two messages is going to be passed through. So let me use an A-list tool. I'm going to put it right here for now. And then I'm going to use my control slider here, right? So how can I create two identical messages? Well, I can just move my slider a little bit and then back, you would think, right? But as you can see in the A-list tool, these aren't identical because as I moved my slider to the right, I sent a value of 1, and as I moved it back to the left, I sent a value of 0. Now in both cases, it's CC0 on channel 1, but the value is different. So what I can do to show you how the double filter works is I can simply add another slider, right? And they are both set to the same position, so now I can easily move both sliders and that will create the exact same message. So let me show you. I move this one to the right by 1 unit here. I'm gonna do the same on this one. And as you can see, this time around we have two identical messages. Same channel, message type, etc. Everything is the same. So let's clear the list and let's drag the A-list tool below the double filter tool, right? And now let's see if when we move both sliders back to 0, one of those messages is going to be filtered. Move the first one, the second one, and as you can see, only one of those two messages got recorded, which is pretty cool. Now, I don't know if this is a bug or a feature, but once I do this little experiment, if I want to try something different, I need to remove the double filter and bring it back in. Otherwise, everything is going to be filtered and nothing is going to be passed through. So yeah, I want to show you how we can limit this to a certain channel, right? If I set, for instance, the channel parameter here to 2, now my slider is sent on channel 1, so the double filter should not do anything to these messages because it's only going to be active on channel 2. So let me move my first slider again, my second slider, and as you can see, both messages got through. So let me remove this again to show you yet another feature, because you might think, well, being able to filter identical messages is all well and good, but wouldn't that be detrimental to your live performance? Because, once you send a certain message, you're never going to be able to send that same message again for the rest of your performance, which might be a problem. Most of us want to use the filter for messages when there isn't as much time in between the first one and the second one, maybe even less than a second, right? In that case, we might want to filter one of those two messages out, but if 10 seconds have passed, we want to be able to send that same message again, right? And that is where the last parameter here comes into play, the timeout parameter. Now, leaving this set to 0 is going to deactivate it, in which case there is basically no time limit, right? Whenever two messages are received and they are the same, they could be 2 hours apart, right? Doesn't matter. One of them is going to get blocked. But if we set this to something different, now we have a time frame. So let me set this to something very high, like 5,000 milliseconds first, which is 5 seconds. Now the tool is going to filter one of the double messages, so long as the second message reaches it within 5 seconds of the first message. So let me move my slider back, the second one too. Now this was within 5 seconds, right? So the filter tool, as you can see, was indeed activated and we only get one message. Let me clear the list and drag in the double filter again. And this time around, let's set this to something different. Let's set this to maybe 100 milliseconds, right? So that means that my second message needs to occur within 1/10 of a second of the first message. If that is the case, then it's going to be filtered out. But if it occurs later than that, if there's more than 1/10 of a second in between my two messages, the filter won't activate. So let's test this. Let me move the slider. I guess 1/10 of a second has passed already, so I can safely move the second one. And as you can see, both make it through the double filter. So that was the double filter, very useful tool. I'm going to keep one of my sliders here because it's going to be useful to demonstrate how the message factory works too. Now this tool, basically what it does is you can set a certain trigger message, right? It could be a node message or aftertouch, any one of these. And whenever that exact message is received by the message factory tool, the tool will generate a new message. And this is where it can get a little confusing, but don't worry, it's actually much easier than it seems, and we'll get there in a second. So let's start with the trigger part. So here is where you would set the message that you want to trigger your new message. So in our case, we have control slider 0. So let me set this to control change. It's already set to 0, which is very convenient. And we could even set a certain range. Let's say that we only want values between 0 and 1 to trigger a new message, right? Anything above 1, if I move my slider here, which is probably around 64, that will not trigger a new message, right? So yeah, let's have a look at this part. So what are status, data, variable bytes? Well, let's have a look at the alias tool, because the data from our previous experiment is still here, and this is the important part. As you can see, there are 3 separate bytes here, right? The first one is called the status byte. And this one identifies the channel we're sending MIDI information on, which in this case is channel 1, and what type of message we're sending. Are we sending a note? Are we sending a CC? Are we sending aftertouch? Those 2 pieces of information are sort of consolidated into this one status byte. And message factory here conveniently allows you to just click on the plus sign. Now we have ourselves a status byte, and we can even select what we want it to look like. So the first number here is the hex version, the second number is the decimal version, and the developer very conveniently included a description as well. So I know, for instance, that a status byte of 140 is a note off message on channel 13. So why don't we create a control change message on channel 1, right? That is a status byte of 176. Now, of course, to make our message complete, we need another 2 bytes, and we can just add them with the plus sign. But I actually want to show you what things look like if we leave it like this. So let me move my control slider, right? That's controller 0. What we get is exactly that, without any further specification. These 2 pieces of information are missing, which is why, incidentally, we are not getting controller 1 or controller 20. We did not include that information, so this defaults to 0, which incidentally is also the original message that we started from. So let's actually set the second byte as well. And we could use, for instance, we don't want that to be a status byte, right? We already set our status byte, so let's set this to data. And here's where we can define the status byte further. If we leave this set to 0, it's going to be CC0. Let's set this to 1, and let's see what happens. Let me move my slider. And as you can see, this time around, we have that second byte, which means that our CC is CC number 1. Now we're missing a third byte, right? That would be the value of CC1 we want to send. And to do this, let's add a third byte. We could use another data byte, right? If you wanted to send a fixed value, let's say 34. So no matter where we set the slider, so long as it is within the range we defined, which is between 0 and 1 in this case, it will output CC1 with a value of 34. Let me show that to you. I'm going to set this to 0, and then I'm going to set it back to 1 again. And both times, as you can see, we got CC1 with a value of 34. Very useful. But maybe we actually don't want this third byte to be a static data byte. Maybe we want this to be a variable byte. So we can use the last value from any control change. Now in my case, since I'm only moving a slider sending CC0, that's what I want to set here as well. We could also limit this to a certain channel. Let's leave it as is first, and then we're going to experiment with changing the channel here. So this time around, my third byte is going to be copied from CC0, which is my original message too, but you could set this to any CC. Maybe you have a separate controller sending CC1. You could use that value as the third byte of your generated message here. So let me set this to 0 and then back to 1. And now those two values should have been copied. And as you can see, they have 0 and 1. Now, if I limited this to say channel 2, we are sending on channel 1. So if I move this back to 0 and then back to 1, as you can see, it does not copy that movement. It defaults back to 0. So yeah, something to keep in mind there. Now, another thing you could do, instead of using a variable byte, you could use a byte from the trigger message. Now, byte number 1, that would be your status byte, right? This part right here. Byte number 2 is this one, and byte number 3 is of course this one. So let's actually, you know what, let's remove both these bytes. Let's leave just the status byte, and let's also enable the pass-through option. This is gonna send a copy of the original message as well as the triggered message. So let's clear the list here and let's see what happens. I move this to 0, and as you can see, here's my original message, right? CC0. And here is my newly created message. It only has the status byte, right? We removed the other 2 bytes. So let's add a trigger message byte, and let's copy byte number 2, right? So byte number 2 would be 0, which means we should now get a message that has 176, 0, and then nothing. So let's try. There we go. Here's our original message, here's our factory created message, and now we have the second byte as well. So let's add another trigger message byte. Let's copy byte number 3. So this time around we should be able to fill in the last space here as well with a copy of the original message. So let's move this to 0. As you can see, here's the original message and here's the copied message. So yeah, this is what you can do with the message factory tool, also very useful. And that was it. Can you believe it? We made it to the end. Every single tool in MidiPipe explained. Thanks for sticking around. Can't wait to see you on another video on the channel. Take care.